Sometimes what isn't in Zelda games is just as interesting as what is. Everything about these games is so iconic, so it's fascinating to get a glimpse into their development with cut content or unused ideas. Whether that's dropped weapons or items, side quests, dungeons, enemies, villains, or in the case of Breath of the Wild, aliens? I've covered cut content a few times before on the channel and it's always a lot of fun, so subscribe if you haven't already for more Zelda content, and let's have a look at some unused assets and ideas from across the series. It's pretty well known that a decent chunk of the Wind Waker was cut due to time constraints. Most famously dropped were 2 extra dungeons, which would have padded out the slightly slim adventure and brought it up to the same number of full dungeons as Ocarina of Time. However, the sections of the game that take place below the surface of the Great Sea also appear to have been reined in considerably. Of the Old Kingdom, Link can only visit Hyrule Castle, Ganon's Tower, and a short road connecting the two, but it's possible that this was intended to be a lot more extensive. For one, there's a small piece of concept artwork found in Hyrule Historia that seems to demonstrate a mechanic where Link could use fishing hooks to travel from Hyrule to the surface, which I've covered before on the channel, but there are also oddities that remain in the full game that could also be leftovers from this idea. For one, if Link travels out of bounds outside of Hyrule Castle, we can find what appears to be doors and passageways leading out of the castle into the small courtyards on either side. There's no collision detection here, so we can't explore it. In fact, it's the same sort of low poly architecture that's found elsewhere in places to represent traversable areas from a distance, like here on Dragon Roost. This part of the island lacks collision, as when Link walks here, it's actually loaded a different area. So these courtyards in Hyrule Castle suggest that the castle itself was originally going to be bigger, with Link able to explore more of Hyrule's seat of power, which would obviously have been amazing. The castle is one of the most interesting areas in the game, somber and eerie, and just by walking through its hall you get a feeling for the weight and scale of the quest on which you've embarked. Ganon's Tower is found a short distance from the castle, along a winding road crawling with enemies, but Link needs to travel through a mountain face in the desert to reach it. In the game, entering an ominous looking door in a cave will immediately take Link to what looks like the basement level of the tower, but it's possible that this wasn't always the case. There's a tiny entrance to a passage through the mountains visible in this desert area, which suggests that Link might have once had to cross the desert to reach the tower. Again, Sunken Hyrule is one of my favourite areas in the whole series, and I'd have loved for this section of the game to even be slightly longer. Zelda herself doesn't feature all too much in Majora's Mask. She only appears in a single flashback where she gives Link the Ocarina of Time and teaches him the Song of Time. Because Majora's Mask was made in a year using assets from Ocarina, Zelda's model and animations are reused. She has 32 animations in Majora's Mask's files that were carried over, most of which are never used. In total, Zelda has 48 animations in Majora's Mask, including 9 that were designed for the sequel but go unused. These are pretty interesting. In particular, there's a full backflip, as well as Zelda playing a flute. A model for this flute is found in Zelda's object. It's the same as the one played by Skull Kids in Ocarina of Time, but here Zelda has unused animations where she specifically plays a flute, and not the Ocarina of Time. What the story behind this flute would have been is unknown, but it's interesting that we could have seen the princess use a completely different instrument in Majora's Mask. Great fairies are found throughout Termina, shattered into 15 tiny stray fairies by Majora. Link can recover these stray fairies from dungeons, eventually restoring the great fairies to power, and they will each reward him with an upgrade. The magic meter in the Great Fairy's mask, the spin attack, a magic meter upgrade, a defense upgrade, and finally the mighty Great Fairy's sword. When a Great Fairy bestows a new ability onto Link, the screen fades to white and back again, and then he receives the upgrade. But it seems that there's a missing piece here. An unused cutscene exists where Link is taught the spin attack by a Great Fairy. She positions his head and sword arm and asks him to perform it for her. And another cutscene depicts a Great Fairy training Link to increase his defense. We see him doing sit-ups and press-ups in front of her. Other cutscenes exist for the other Great Fairy upgrades, like increased magic and the Great Fairy's sword, but they're obviously incomplete. Link just stands in an empty space with the fairy. These unfinished cutscenes don't add anything particularly significant to the game, but it adds a little bit more charm to the Great Fairies. I love seeing them help Link position himself for the spin attack, or physically train him to increase his defense. They obviously were dropped from the game before they were completed, perhaps due to the tiny amount of time in which the game was developed. In a late 1997 interview with Shigeru Miyamoto, around a year before Ocarina of Time released, the game's producer described the Forest Medallion as the Wind Magic Medallion, which could be seen equipped by Link in multiple pre-release screenshots. He goes on to explain that there are 6 types of magic, including fire, wind, darkness, and light, and that these magics could be used in conjunction with Link's bow. It's well documented how the Wind Medallion went on to become the Forest, and the Ice Medallion went on to become the Water, meaning at one point there were medallions for fire, ice, wind, light, spirit, and darkness, or shadow. The Ocarina of Time itself was added later on in development, and before this, the medallions were used to warp as well as power Link's arrows or cast magic spells. Of course, the arrows powered by the ice, fire, and light medallions survived into the full game, the fire, ice, and light arrows, but the wind, spirit, and shadow arrows were dropped. However, thanks to the leak of a 1997 build of Ocarina of Time earlier this year, we can find the graphics for these powered arrows, the colours of which match the beta colours for the medallions. So at some point during development, Link could use wind, spirit, and shadow arrows by combining the bow with his medallions. By changing values in the game's code, it's possible to see some leftover properties of these cut arrows. While they appear identical to the fire arrows, they have different effects on some enemies. Just like how the light arrow almost always results in a purple rupee dropping when used to kill an enemy, the wind and spirit arrows cause magic jars and arrows to drop respectively, and the shadow arrows seem to make some enemies drop fairies, but it's not as consistent. Also found in the beta build is evidence that every dungeon in the game would have had corresponding magic spells, not just the 3 that remain in the game, Din's Fire, Nehru's Love, and Farore's Wind. A tiny glimpse of this remains. The Shadow Temple must be opened with Din's Fire, but the only clue given by the game is the mark of the Fire Medallion on the ground. Knowing that Din's Fire was once the magic spell of the Fire Medallion, this makes a lot more sense. Text in the leaked beta build of the game reveals the original uses of these spells. Ice would have extinguished fires, Farore's Wind would have apparently activated when in danger, the Spirit Medallion would let you transform into Navi, the Light Medallion apparently would have been some sort of attack, and the Shadow Medallion would have made you invisible to enemies. There's a ton of really interesting things in the beta build of Ocarina of Time, and the Lost Elemental arrows and medallion spells are among the best. I'm pretty clueless when it comes to the code that makes these games work, so check the description for links to the sources I used for this section. As opposed to the rest of this list, where we have unused ideas and content that I'd have, for the most part, loved to have seen make it into their final games, this last idea is one I'm glad didn't, one that could have set the Zelda series on an entirely different path. When developing Ocarina of Time, after completion of Super Mario 64, Miyamoto originally planned for the entire game to take place within Ganon's castle. The castle would have worked as a hub, just like Peach's castle from Super Mario 64, with different rooms featuring different adventures, like dark meadows or oceans. This was mainly because Miyamoto thought that a huge open space like Hyrule Field would be impossible on the N64 hardware, and the game instead would have been more similar to Adventure of Link, focused on combat. The boss of the Forest Temple, Phantom Ganon, is an idea left over from this period of development. The idea for this boss battle was conceived very early on, and Miyamoto used it to demonstrate his concept to others. Just like how Mario 64's levels are accessed through the paintings hanging on the walls of the castle, Phantom Ganon rides out from paintings in his boss room. This idea is also used earlier on in the Forest Temple too, where 2 of the Po sisters are found hiding within magical paintings. It's fascinating to think that the entirety of Ocarina of Time could have taken place within Ganon's castle, and I'm very glad that it didn't. As much as I love Peach's castle as an overworld, part of what made Ocarina of Time so incredible to play was its massive, connected 3D world. It's cool that remnants of this idea survived all the way up to release, like the Phantom Ganon boss fight, but I'm glad that this idea was, for the most part, scrapped. Thanks for watching this video. What are your personal favourite cut ideas or unused assets in the series? Let me know in the comments. If you like this video, leave a like or subscribe if you haven't already for more Zelda content. Cheers guys, and I'll see you next time.